Jennifer.
Yes, sir.
Who's going to share y'all's presentation?
Marissa Davis is going to share her screen.
All right. So when we get ready, have that prompt and ready to go. Go ahead and make sure you've got your PowerPoint up. It tends to work a whole lot better if you already have it up before you switch over and start sharing, just as a reminder. Okay. There's Dr. Hallman. He's got his necktie on and everything tonight. Looks all official. Oh, me. Welcome, everybody. What time is it? Oh, 6:59. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and we've got about another minute, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. This is MELS 603, Wednesday night. This is our 6th class session. Before we start into our first case study this evening, I want to quickly look at our weekly schedule. So I'll share my screen and do a share. I'll close that. As I said, we are in week 6, case study 1. We just came off doing our discipline for last week, where you had to observe a due process. And some of you, that was discipline. Then you had to interview an AP. Some of you did EC. Tonight's case study is a due process. It's a discipline as well. And so looking ahead in 2 weeks, we will have our second case study. I'll speak more about it next week. It's pretty straightforward. You can read it. You should all be finishing up your OMA. The scores are coming in. They're very good. There was a question about some of you, a couple have gotten 3.75s. That's a great score. And as your grader said to you, that has more to do with your school and your circumstance than your ability. So don't sweat the 3.5s and 3.75s. Those are excellent scores on the OMA. The OMA is a harder one.
She's making noise and I have to zoom in a second.
It's more about your school than it is about you. So I've been very pleased with the scores. So that's where we are. I covered the OMA last week. I will cover it again. I covered the skip last week. I'll cover it again next week. But everybody should be far enough along to get started on it. But I'll follow back up on it next week.
Hurry.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on. I don't want to spend a lot of time. We need to dive in tonight. And so our first group presenting tonight is Jennifer, Kristen, Marissa, Cherie, and Allie. All right. No, wait a minute. Amy. Can't even read my own writing. But anyway, so share your screen and let's get started.
It's waiting on you to unshare, Dr. Lamb.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it to stop my share. It's kind of hesitated on me there.
All right, thank you.
We got it.
Can everyone see the screen?
We can. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Tonight, myself, along with Kristen, Jennifer, Cherie, and Allie, we will be presenting our take on case study 1, Bobby Strikes Out. We included the background information on the case, but by now, I would assume that everyone is familiar with the case. And so we'll move right along and getting to the principal's next step. So for our principal's next step, we discussed as a group that it may be important for the principal to meet with the teacher to ensure that she is clear on both the assignment and grading process. She needs to have a conversation with the parent and guardian about the situation to ensure that they understand the consequences of cheating and don't just stop at giving the student a failing grade. A plan should be created so that there is some type of restorative justice in place, whether that be allowing the student to make it up or complete an additional assignment. And then lastly, go back and make sure that there's clear communication among the teacher and administration about who actually assigns grades and the grading expectations for the district or school.
So then we discussed the due process portion of this, and obviously it's broken down into two parts, procedural and substantive. And so we kind of discussed that at length. Marissa, you could go ahead. And this is just a little graphic to show that. So definitely the school is required to provide Bobby with due process in any situation. We have to give him the opportunity to share his side and his case, as well as the teacher, before making any sort of a decision. The substantive part, we talked about, yes, Bobby did cheat. He admitted it openly, but was the policy clear? And as a group, we kind of thought that there was some wiggle room with that because of the wording in it, where it said may result in a failing grade. It definitely wasn't clearly defined. And then Mrs. Barton's grading policies and expectations of punishment, we felt was excessive, unreasonable, and also failing Bobby could be very damaging to his future, and could be a violation of that substantive due process. And then we also did say that the school, as far as the procedural portion, the school has to follow the process, regardless of who the student is, whether they're an athlete, band student, and whoever their family is. You got to follow clear guidelines and fair, ethical process. And then also we talked about how Tim has to explore all options to resolve this incident in an ethical and just way. He just has to make sure that the procedures of due process are followed, but also we discussed that there could be some consequences with that with the teacher as far as losing some trust.
Another big idea related to this case was the idea of arbitrary and capricious grading. And then dictionary definition is willful and unreasonable action without consideration or in disregard of facts or law. In this instance, the facts that we're basing our decision on is the school or the district's grading policy. It's important for us to notice that teachers don't assign grades, they don't create grading policies. They have the choice to follow it or not to follow it. In this case, the teacher manipulated the grading system so that the project accounted for more than 50% or half of the student's final grade. And that is having one assignment represent a student's overall performance in a course is definitely an example of arbitrary grading. She used her own power and free will to make that decision, knowing that it would be no way for Bobby to increase his grade or increase his score so that he could pass the class.
Then we discussed the 4 ethical paradigms. And at first we discussed all 4 of them, but in further discussion, we came to the conclusion that we felt the principal was sort of caught in an ethical dilemma between the paradigm of the ethics of care and the ethics of profession. So Marissa, if you could. As far as the ethical paradigm of care, this has to do with compassion, your compassion-oriented value people over principles. And our principal had several choices and several sets of people that he went through the motions of, if I make this decision, then this will happen. So if he makes a decision to collaborate with the teacher for an alternate solution, more than likely she won't agree to that because she was very much passionate about this is the way we need, this is the policy, we're going to follow the policy, so much so that she got a union rep to go visit the principal. He could broker a deal with all parties involved, the uncle, the student. And then what happens to the teachers? The teachers will lose his trust because they don't feel that they're supported by an administrator who doesn't follow policy. And then that breaks down the school community. And then in further discussion, we realized that any decision really that appears to be helping Bobby pass or appeasing the prominent outspoken uncle may result in a negative perception of leadership. And as a leader of the school, he needs to represent and be thought of as making ethical decisions and following policy.
So the next part, and you'll notice I've had to join twice because I live on a mountain and the internet's just really bad. So my mouth is speaking over in one, but I'm speaking from another. So yay. So the other ethical paradigm that we really talked about was about profession. The fact that Bobby has to be held accountable for his cheating. But one thing that our team really discussed was the fact that the case study specifically said that Bobby broke down and he admitted fault and he knew that what he was doing was wrong. But the teacher just didn't seem to have any worry with that necessarily. When it comes to modeling the principles of that self-awareness, reflective practice, the teacher is showing transparency in a way, but she has that union rep. She has someone that can cover her behavior that's not entirely ethical because she's not giving Bobby the right to be able to go and complete another assignment or something of that way. And we talked about potential moral and legal consequences. What different consequences could come from the uncle on the school board, could come from Bobby's family, could come from the school community as a whole if their star player doesn't get to play on the team. And really the big thing that we spoke about was that we have to have the best interest of students at heart. There has to be a way that Bobby can either redo his assignment. Marissa called it restorative justice. How can we make sure that we are giving the very best to the student that we possibly?
Uh-oh, I think we lost Allie.
And then we were kind of torn on how we wanted to conclude our time. We started off with takeaways, but we came up with a better name of aha moments. And so these are just some of the ideas that we're walking away with that are at the forefront of our mind as we conclude our presentation. The first is that it's critical that there's clear communication between school leaders and teachers regarding grading policies. For example, the teacher could not use not being aware of a grading policy as an excuse to violate it. As an employee of the district or the school, it is the expectation as a professional that she's aware of grading policies. So school leaders should do a better job of making sure, I shouldn't say a better job, but should ensure that all of their staff are clear about the policies in their school. And we're taking away the idea that principals are the ones who ultimately assigns grades, not teachers. And lastly, to kind of piggyback on what Allie was saying, we are champions for our students. You know, we reflect on our competencies, and one of those are customer focus. In the business of school, our students are our customers. And so sometimes we have to make decisions that are not popular with adults, but at the end of the day, we are advocating and being champions for our students. And we'd like to leave you all with the quote, "Ethics begin where policies and rules leave off." This concludes our presentation, Dr. Lim. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. All right. I'm not sure that we caught an understanding early on in this case, and it kind of led you down a path that I'm not real happy with here. When the policy for cheating in this district said may result in a failing grade, you have to know that that didn't mean could result in a failing grade for the year. It only means a failing grade on that assignment. And how do I know that? It doesn't say only on that assignment. Well, I know that because I know that zero tolerance policies are illegal. So if we go to the handbook, the disciplinary data handbook for North Carolina, and there's one similar for South Carolina. Let me share my screen. I've got that queued up. A requirement of the Office of Civil Rights report is you have to tell on yourself, no tolerance expulsions. Refers to an action taken by the local agency removing a child from his or her regular school for the remainder of the year or longer because of zero tolerance. This is illegal. And even if you offer something like an alternative like summer school, it's still illegal and it's still zero tolerance. So there is no policy for cheating that says that a kid can fail for the year. The teacher manipulated the scale to do that against the grading policy. So this is not where the principal is torn between supporting a teacher or thinks that the other teachers will, if you got to support teachers. Your job is not to support teachers. Let me be clear. Your job is not to support teachers. Nowhere in your job does it say that in order to be an effective or to do your job as a school administrator that you have to support teachers. Not when they have obviously broken the law. The most that this child can receive is 1 day in school suspension. That's the most that the code of conduct says you can give a child for cheating anywhere. This teacher manipulated a grade illegally, arbitrary and capriciously manipulated. This is not a worry about, will teachers think that I don't support them if I go again? You have no choice but to overrule this as the principal because the law has been broken. When you were a kid and your mama said, if your friend jumped off the roof, would you jump off with them? This is a case of that. Because the teacher illegally made up a law here or broke the law, doesn't mean that you have any compunction to support that teacher. Understanding your job is not to support teachers anyway. Your job is to follow law and policy. That's what they hired you for. The teacher broke the law, intentional. Now, full disclosure, Bobby's a turd. I mean, he's probably pushed her buttons all year long. That's okay, but you still can't do something like this. And you can't go along with the law being violated like this. Zero tolerance expulsions, even if you offer an alternative placement like summer school, are still against the law. They are illegal. You cannot do that. If he'd have brought a gun, you couldn't do that. But especially cheating on a out of class assignment that can't be worth more than a fraction of 1 point. The teacher illegally went against the district policy. The state of North and South Carolina both limit state exams to no more than 30%. Even the state exam can't count more than that, so that you can't be arbitrary and capricious with it. Out of school assignments can't count more than 10%, period. In aggregate for the entire year. This is not a case of may fail, and so you're kind of caught in, you're not caught in between. It doesn't say that the kid can fail for the year under any circumstances here. Can only fail that. Now, I think you ought to give them an alternative assignment. You're not required to, but you ought to do restorative justice. But even if he got a 0 on this, it wouldn't have any impact on his yearly grade because it's a throwaway assignment. I mean, this is literally taking a shotgun to a housefly. I mean, this is so over the top in terms of the consequence for something as insignificant as this. Now, I allow people every semester, well, cheating's a big deal. In the course of human events, not so much. It's certainly not like he brought a gun and shot somebody. I mean, it doesn't rise to that level of infraction. Certainly, again, very capricious in terms of the punishment, nowhere near fits the crime. You take this to court and you'd get laughed out of court. They would force you to go in arbitration, or they'd just do they'd give a bench decision where the judge would find you stupid and guilty, and you'd have to pay that family a bunch of money. That would never even get to a jury. That would never even get through the process. That is so over the top in what has happened. But my concern is this notion that the ethic of profession, that we have to make sure teachers know we support them. teachers would be angrier at you if you let something like this stand than if you did something where you actually were a champion for students. Again, your job is not to support teachers. That is not your primary role. Your job is law and policy. Now, you should be as kind and as supportive and professional with your teachers and teaching staff and staff members as you can be. But that's not the point of the exercise, is to to provide them a job or to make their day easy. What do they do at Jones Sausage? They make sausage. What do we do in public school? We teach kids. When you get it twisted, when you forget why you're there as an administrator, that's when it goes wrong. This is a fairly easy case of a teacher did something really bad to a kid. The worst thing you can do, other than a physical or sexual act, this teacher abused a child. Doesn't matter if they're the best kid or the worst kid or a wealthy family or well-to-do or not. You say, well, Dale, this is just a case study. I had a call on Monday from a parent, and I consulted on a case where something similar to this happened on Monday. This happens all the time, where way too much, an arbitrary and capricious decision was made. We got the kid back in school today, but this happens all the time, where teachers go too far and principals in the notion of, I want to make sure I support my teachers, go along with something as idiotic and harmful as this. You can't be that person. You cannot be that person. One of the ladies that teaches with us now, Dr. Anna Maraglia, she was a principal fellow. She was AP of mine years ago. She said, I'm so ashamed that when I interviewed to be a principal fellow, that I told them that I wanted to be a champion for teachers. She said, I don't know why in the world they picked me to be a principal fellow. How dumb I was, not understanding that wasn't the role at all. But that was prior to her MSA program at UNC Charlotte. And now but that's where we are coming, when our only perspective is teaching. That's the only perspective we have. But we have to learn that we're trying to change our lens as administrators. It's a different job than teaching. And I know that we all want our principal to be a champion for us, but that's not their role. And so I'm going to let Dr. Holloman, I'm guessing, let's see, is Dr. Griffin?
I'm here.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you are. Oh, you're up at the top. I couldn't see you up there. I'm going to start with Dr. Griffin Jordan and let her speak too. Now, I'm a little hard, but I'm maybe she's the voice of reason here. Dr. Griffin Jordan, weigh in on this case.
Dr. Lamb, I agree with you. While we are there to support instructional learning, that's how we support our teachers to make sure they have the tools that they need to teach. Our job is to make sure the students are cared for and get an education. So with this case, it shouldn't have been hard for the principal to decide or make the call on supporting the student, as opposed to thinking that the teacher would feel some kind of way or the staff would feel some kind of way. From my experience, and I believe you made reference to it as well, you'll find that the teachers, the staff, will rally behind the students more so than a teacher that is being unfair to students. So as an administrator, don't think that, if you call out a teacher for being unethical or breaking the law or doing something that they're not supposed to do, don't feel that you're going to have, side looks from the staff members, because most of the staff members know what they're supposed to do. They're doing it right. And if they're doing it right, they expect their coworkers to do it right. And they expect that you're going to call out their coworkers if they don't. So that's one thing that I wanted to pick up on, regarding the issue with the teachers and the administrator.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Holloman?
So I'm going to play the devil's advocate for a second because I think it's fun.
Oh, good.
The principal did say that Bobby cheated and he broke an important school rule and he should fail. He didn't change his tune until he talked to the superintendent. Now, I'll explain to you why that's important. Standard 7 of your evaluation process as a principal will be micro-political leadership. This is an example of micro-political leadership. The superintendent has already told him and called him by first name. He said, my advice is to be careful. He said everything he did say right there. He knows it's a situation where you might be able to support the teacher, but you also have a school board member who at some point in time is going to be voting on your contract, who will talk about you in the community. It's about baseball. It's about sports. There's a lot of factors that are there beyond just a grade. And like Dr. Lamb said, it's not the only grade this kid's ever going to have in his whole life, but it could be the most important lesson he learns. So how do you take all of those pieces, leverage it all? You can support the teacher at the same time supporting the student by telling the teacher in private that 50% shouldn't be on this grade scale. That's too much, and you know that's too harsh. What are some other options you could do? Because they have an evaluation also, and you're going to evaluate them in the same way. There has to be a little bit of a win-win there because the teacher did wrong and in the same way the kid did wrong. And if you bring the hammer down on the kid, you might as well bring the hammer down on the teacher too. Just my 2 cents on the devil advocate side.
Yeah, I mean, there's micro political here as well, but the out on this one that makes it easy is it's a violation of the law. Can't do this. That's what makes it easy. Sometimes it's not a violation of the law. Sometimes it's an opinion. So Marissa has a question.
I do, Dr. Lamb. When you started off your commentary right after we finished sharing, you mentioned that we were going down the wrong road, but we
Yep.
are in agreement with everything that you just said. And that's what we stated during the presentation. I think when we were looking at the 4 paradigms, we were expected to consider all aspects of the case, but we were in full agreement. And we stated that the teacher was in the wrong for this in this situation.
But it should not be a conflict. When I say you're going down the wrong road, this is not a conflict in terms of the ethic of care and the ethic of profession. That is not a conflict. This is an easy one. This is a violation of the law. That should not be a conflict of your professional ethics because this is a violation of the law. There is no conflict here. This is a clear wrong. This is not one of those toss-ups. There's not really a clear policy or a clear law that's been violated here. I've got to pick one or the other. That's when there would be a conflict between care and profession. This one is a law was violated by the teacher. There is no ethical conflict for your ethic of profession here. Now, if the law hadn't been violated, you're exactly right. But again, you got to understand, even though it says may receive a failing grade, it's not for the year. It's just on the assignment. So if you give this kid an exclusion, which a failing grade for the year is a 1-year exclusion, without due process, more than the handbook calls for, you have violated federal law here. You have metered out a 0, even if you give them the chance to go to summer school. Again, it says clearly in the handbook, even if you give them an alternative placement, doesn't matter. It's still an illegal 0 tolerance expulsion. The teacher broke the law. No ethical conflict here for you at all as a principal. When somebody breaks the law, you have to follow the law always. There's never an exception to I must follow the law. What Dr. Hallman's talking about is in cases that might be micro-political where there's a choice. But when there's a clear decision, when there's a clear-cut case of the teacher broke the law, you have no ethical concern. As Dr. Griffin Jordan said, teachers will hold you accountable more for going along with tomfoolery like this than they will, we need to be supported every time. That they want you to be the right person and do the right thing. So don't get into that notion of I want to be a champion for teachers. I'm afraid teachers will look badly on me if I do this. It's a moral conflict, or it's a care versus teacher broke the law. This is an easy one. You got, you know, the principal, he didn't deserve it in this case because he didn't know what he was doing, but he got a reprieve on the teacher broke the law. So he got a reprieve on this. And as Dr. Hallman said, he didn't even know that to begin with. But he, you know, he got a save. Sometimes you get a little bit of grace, even though you don't deserve it. Sometimes you get a little grace, and he got one. So this should not be an ethical conflict for profession in any stretch of the imagination. A teacher broke the law, and you must follow the law and correct this. Now, the bigger question is, what do you do with this teacher? And that's for the group that just presented. What do you do with this teacher?
Well, Dr. Lamb, I can speak on that. How are you? I
I'm
feel
great.
that I feel that there needs to be a conversation with the principal and the actual teacher to state, make sure there's clarity that the teacher knows. I mean, we spoke about it in our group about, because you let us know in one of our classes about the weighting of everything and how it's just impossible for this teacher to do those type of things and that assignment to weigh the way it does. So a conversation definitely does need to be done. And if there has to be an intervention of help for that teacher to understand better how to do what he needs to do or she needs to do, so this wouldn't happen again.
Yeah, you definitely don't want this to happen again. Now, if the teacher made a run at Bobby, you know, what is she going to do next? See, that's what I always worry about. If you do this, what wouldn't you do? You know, that's not a game. It's called the law of unintended consequences. And see, I worry about things like that. If I've got somebody that I know is trying to burn our house down, you know, we were able to got the fire put out, you know, metaphorically, we got able to get the fire put out this time, but I'm going to be wondering, where's the fire going to come next time? And is she going to be a little bit smarter next time and figure a way to get me where I don't get that grace, I don't get that reprieve where she broke the law. You know, that's what I would be worried about. And so Yolanda asked, could you write this teacher up? Well, certainly you could write this. This teacher broke the law, violated policy. Absolutely. Now, Yolanda just came over to my side, the dark side. I don't know if y'all can see those when they pop up the chat. She said, can you dismiss this teacher? Let me read this. So teacher could the teacher be immediately dismissed or given a chance to resign since she broke the law? See, that's where I'd be headed with this. I can tell you right now. When you go big, you know, you play a man's game, it charges a man's price.
So Dr. Lamb, I have a question.
You know, when you play an adult game, it charges an adult's price. You made a big play here as a teacher. You broke the law in a big way, tried to exclude a kid a year, violated federal law, state grading policy. You know, you went big. I got to give you that. You went big. But now an adult's game charges an adult's price. Couldn't work for me. I would do whatever it took that this person would not be back in the building again for me. I can tell you right now, if you know, if you go after the king, you better knock him out. You better kill him.
Dr. Lamb.
You know, if I survive this one, I'm coming after you. Yes.
So I had a question, Dr. Lamb. In our group, when we were talking about justice, we kind of talked about talking to the district attorney at the district based on the fact that she brought her union person. Is that too extreme, or?
Oh, no.
You know, where the principal consult with the district attorney in reference to the concern of her bringing.
Yeah, the general counsel, you would talk with the associate general counsel. On a case like this, you would consult with them if your district's big enough. You know, either the general counsel if you're in a small district, or the associate if you're in a big district that handles cases like this involving students. You certainly would talk with them about, and they would be the first one to point out that the teacher violated the law, but you would certainly talk with them about what your options are. I mean, I would be for trying to dismiss this teacher myself. I mean, this is one of those you've way over the line. This you can, you got to at least try. I think you got to at least try. I mean, if you allow this to go, if you allow this to go by the boards, what will you allow next time? I mean, the heart of our business is you can't abuse kids. Nobody ought not have to write that down or tell you that, but you can't abuse kids. That's kind of, that's kind of the biggie in our business. I mean, she took a shot. She swung big. I'll say that for her. She went big. She violated federal law and state law and local board policy. She went, that's a trifecta. And so that's the notion here. Now, our two sitting principals, they may have a different idea than me, but I'm old school. You don't do this. I don't give you the opportunity to do something like this but one time. That would be me. Now, we'll go in reverse order here, and I can already see the smirk on Dr. Holloman's face. He's going to talk micro-political again. I already know. He's a politician over here. He's running for office. Tell us about it, Dr. Holloman.
No, I'm not. I'm gonna just offer this. I think that, if she has a defense with a union rep saying that it follows and it's consistent with the student handbook, and that student handbook was approved or as part of the Board of Education's, policy and plan, it might be time to actually revise that student handbook to not allow loopholes that violate the law.
Yeah.
Somewhere there's also something that's there that needs to be addressed, because if she's holding that as her Bible to say, this is why I can do what I just did, then there's also something that needs to be addressed and fixed. Probably a good opportunity for the principal and the school board to look at that, especially if you have a school board member who's, a family member might be impacted by this, to maybe narrow this down a little bit. So that way it's less of an issue for other teachers later on to use something as simple as this to maybe hang another kid out to dry.
Yeah. I mean, I think that language needs to be changed in their policy that simply says may receive a failing grade on that particular assignment. I mean, it's understood that that's all it can be, but it doesn't say that. It can't be for the year because that's illegal. That's zero tolerance. That's a violation of federal law. But it doesn't expressly say that, but you have to know that's a quick fix in your policy. Is may receive a failing grade on the assignment. That would cover you on that, or would say would receive half credit and can do a makeup, whatever you want to do. But the part of this where that this is intentional is that the grading scale was manipulated, that one out of class assignment counted more than 50% of the final grade. That was a manipulation. That in nobody's world is that legal or allowable. Policy won't fix that. I mean, that's the part where the teacher's got to go for me. Is you took a throwaway assignment that was a nothing burger and made it count more than 50% of the yearly grade, over twice as much as the state exam counts. In North Carolina, the state exam can't count but 20%. More than twice as much as the state exam on an out-of-class assignment? Really? And the teacher, that you think that would be okay as a teacher? You think that nobody would notice that you have excluded the kid for a year? A failing grade is a year-long exclusion from school. Legally, the kid don't even have to show up the next year and repeat 8th grade. He can just wait a year and go to 9th grade. It's a year-long exclusion. And offering an alternative placement in the summer, again, does not change the fact that you excluded that kid a year by doing something illegal, counting an out-of-class assignment more than 50% of the yearly grade. So that, I got to go. I mean, teacher and I've got to go. It's going to be one of us. It's going to be, pistols at noon out in the street. One of us has got to go. That's just, it's that simple. Now, Dr. Dr. Griffin Jordan's not a nicer person than I am. Let's ask her what she'd do.
Well, if you decided not to fire the teacher on the spot, just if, you could look at a monitored growth plan. There are a certain number of observations that teachers go through in a year, but as a principal, you can have as many additional observations or evaluations as you want to. So this would be the perfect time to put that plan in place. Part of their evaluation, part of the standards is ethical behavior. And of course, if you start your documentation and they get rated as developing, that's the paper trail that you would start. And you could be as specific as possible with their growth plan. They would need to document their grading practices down to the exact scores for the exact assignments and what is needed. You could make it so that they would really consider finding another job, because you would be on them and they would have to be documenting everything that they do. And before they assign this, they would have to get your approval. You could do whatever you needed to do to make sure it never happens again.
right.
Meet with them weekly, or your AP, somebody, meet with them weekly, go over their Power School grades, anything. You put it in there in that growth plan. When they don't do it, bam, they did not follow through with the monitored growth plan that you have set them up for, and boom.
Yeah. There's two things here. One is North and South Carolina is a right to our right to work states. And so although we think we have unions, we really don't have unions. We have teacher associations and they don't have the same status as unions. Now, what Dr. Griffin Jordan just explained is what you would definitely have to do in a union state. You would not be able to fire that person. And so you would have to go through that monitored growth plan. You'd have to do all of that. But in a right to work state without union, you don't have to do that. But it boils down to where is your ethical concern? This is where the ethical concern comes in. What are you going to stand for ethically as a school administrator? I mean, what is the line that people can't cross that work in your building, the adults in your building? What is the line that they can't cross in terms of their behavior toward kids? I freely admit I'm from a different time. That's easy to see just by looking at the screen. I'm an old man. I'm a grumpy old man. But I'm from a time when you just didn't treat kids like this. You just didn't. I know that maybe that's changed, or if it has, it's a thing. But it goes back to one of the wonderful things about working at a Christian college is we can talk about our faith and we can talk about who we are as Christian people. I just can't go along with this kind of behavior. Your religion, regardless of what it is, religion's just about how you treat the other people in the world. That's what religion is. It's how you operate and how you treat people in the world. This to me is just unacceptable. This pushes my buttons. I just don't think you can have people working with kids who would do something this heinous to a child. This falls in the same category as physical or sexual abuse to me. This cannot stand in school. Now, other folks don't feel as strongly about it as I do. But I think the least that you would do is a monitored plan. I think that has to be the least response that you give. The most is you be crazy old man like me, and pistols at high noon. One of us has got to leave town. It's somewhere in there, but you can't just let this go and expect it not to happen again. If you don't address this, next time around, it'll be worse than this. And you may not get that grace that you got this time by the law. You may not get a save like that. All right. The first one always takes the most time, and so hopefully we can go through the rest of these a little bit faster. But as I told you, it'll take longer tonight. So Kayla, Amanda, and Brandon, you're up.
Good evening. I'm going to share my screen. This is Amanda.
Hey, Amanda.
Can you guys see that?
We can. Great. Thank you.
All right, Kayla.
All right, good evening. So we have case study 1 as well. Amanda, can you go to the next page? So Amanda, Brandon, and I worked on this as a team. So let's just go over due process. So in our text, it says the courts demand a high standard of performance from educators in the areas of student welfare, which is on page 346. Standard procedures must be followed, otherwise the consequences can be huge and detrimental, as the educator / school can and will be held liable. So as we know, there are 2 kinds of due process, substantive and procedural. So substantive is going to be the system, the rules or policies that the district has written stating what students are owed in due process. And procedural, did the administrator follow all of the steps of the due process accurately and in a fair manner? Next slide. So in our text, they continue to say that discipline and order is essential for the education function to be performed. However, the court required schools to set up the hearing procedures that must be followed before students are suspended. So these hearing procedures must include an oral or written notice of the charges against the student, an explanation of the evidence the authorities have to support the charges, the opportunity for the student to present his or her side of the problem. Page 147. Next slide, please. Okay, so within the due process, so substantive would be the teacher reports the allegation in writing via a school online system such as Educator's Handbook. The assigned administrator reviews the written allegation and schedules a student and or parent conference with the administrator, which is going to be when proper notice of the charges are given. The administrator will state the allegations made by the teacher in that conference. The student will have the opportunity to respond. If a student admits to the allegations made, we'll discuss consequences according to the student/parent handbook. If a student disagrees with the allegations made, the administrator conducts an investigation into the matter. In this case, administrator will receive the student's work and the proof of plagiarism from the teacher. So if the investigation reveals that the student is guilty, we'll inform the student or parent, discuss school policy and what is or is not tolerated or accepted, and review consequences by referencing the handbook. So that's the fair and impartial hearing. Procedural is the administrator should follow the steps in order. All right, so what should the principal's course of action be? So for me as an administrator, I would review the teacher syllabus and grading policy to ensure that it is aligned with the school's grading policy. So for example, at my school, all major assignments, tests or projects are going to be worth 50% combined, and minor assignments, which is homework, classwork, and quizzes, are also going to be worth 50% combined of the student's overall course grade. So I would determine which category, major or minor, this assignment falls into and its exact percentage of the overall course grade. So the principal needs to gather this information in the event that the superintendent asks the principal. I would review Bobby's current grades for this grading period in the teacher's online gradebook. For example, my school uses Canvas. If not available online, I would request a copy of the teacher's gradebook to review Bobby's grades for all assignments in the current grading period. So the principal should be able to calculate a numeric average based on Bobby's assignment grades. I would meet with the teacher, excuse me, individually, asking why and how this one assignment means that Bobby will fail for the course. Inform the teacher that it is not legally allowed for a teacher to fail a student for the course based on the student plagiarizing one assignment. Reference the school policy on plagiarism or cheating and the student/parent handbook to inform her that she must not fail Bobby on the sole basis of plagiarizing. Doing so is capricious and not tolerated. So I would ask the teacher if this is Bobby's first consequence plagiarizing, which is just giving me information on what the consequence will be according to the handbook. So this was my slide. So I just put the link to my school's policy. So can you go to the next slide? Because I actually just took screenshots. So this is the example from Northwestern High School in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So on the left, I screenshotted the table of contents in the handbook because it is very long. But as you can see, or if we can see, toward the bottom of the first screenshot on the left, the cheating/academic dishonesty policy would be on page 12. And then over to the right, I screenshotted what is on page 12 about the cheating/academic dishonesty policy. So the plagiarism would fall under this category. And as we see here, first offense in any one class, a 0 received on the material. And that is, like Dr. Lamb had been mentioning, the 0 is for the assignment, not for the entire course. So parent contact, I'm sorry?
Good.
Okay. No opportunity for makeup, retest, or extra work. Referral filed with appropriate assistant principal. In my school, assistant principals, they split up the alphabet. So again, when I had mentioned earlier, I'm talking about wherever the student falls, or however the school does it with whoever the assistant principal is assigned. And if the student is a part of any clubs or teams, the sponsors would be notified. Second offense, same as above, but as we can see here, it's no failure for the course or any way to basically keep the student out of class or so, or suspension. It's just not in our handbook. So thank you, Amanda, for that. Can you go on to the next slide? So I would also retrieve Bobby's signed copy of the student/parent handbook in his file, because something we do at my school is every year, students and parents sign the handbook. And that is the school's acknowledgement that the parent has read through, and the parent and student have read through the handbook, which is slightly updated every year. And that just really supports, Bobby will get the consequence either way, according to the handbook, but it's just helpful to have because we're going to base the consequences off of our handbook. So I would schedule a due process hearing with Bobby and his parent to review the allegations, give him the opportunity to address it and discuss a course of action. We'll review the school policy on plagiarism, referencing the handbook, and determining the consequence based on that. We'll inform Bobby and his parent what the consequences will be, first offense versus second offense, and then we'll ensure them that Bobby will not be failing the course based on plagiarizing the assignment. And we'll end the meeting administering the paperwork for the adequate consequence and inform Bobby that he is not to plagiarize anymore. So that's what I would do with the student. And then on the hand of the teacher, everything that was said in the previous conversation, the previous presentation, agreed. Action needs to be taken because a teacher just simply cannot do that. and a zero tolerance policy. So that's all I had. So Brandon. Brandon.
All right, everyone. So I'm going to be covering the justice paradigm of ethics. There's a list right there of what those paradigms are. If you go to the next slide, Amanda. And just for clarification, obviously, the top list there is not relevant to this case study. And then the list down below are relevant. If we'll go to the next slide, please. So obviously, we discussed this earlier about arbitrary and capricious standards. We know that what was done was more than what the law allows. It's definitely not a logical or reasonable punishment, and that the punishment doesn't fit the crime in this situation, making it very capricious. We know that failing grade should have been on one assignment and not the entire course, which is in violation of zero tolerance policy, making it illegal. As Dr. Lamb mentioned, most end of course tests or state assessments at the end of the year only count 20-30% of the grade based on what state that you work in. And that interview project is well over that percentage of counting towards the final grade. From a legal standpoint, the court would definitely rule in favor of Bobby's family and go after both the teacher and administrator. Not to mention, it's one thing suing the district, but there may even be grounds for them to do civil lawsuits.
That is correct.
Against, going against individuals. And as Dr. Lamb would infamously say, come after your house and everything
That
else.
is correct.
So if Amanda will go to the next slide, please. All right, and so just digging further into the justice paradigm, thinking about fairness, we know that it's not fair for his actions to go without penalty and not to give him any special privileges because of baseball or because of his uncle being president of the Chamber of Commerce or on the Board of Education. Again, the interview project definitely is not fair. It's not only academically not sound, but think about a student that has had an A in that course, all year, or a B or a C, and then one project drags them down, midway through the year or at the end of the year to where they almost fail that course. And we know high school, people are thinking about college GPAs and things like that. So it's definitely something that needs to be reassessed with that teacher to make sure that there's more fairness there. Equity, how has administration previously dealt with other students regarding plagiarism? In the past or that school year, have they failed the course or just the assignment? Have they been given, suspension, detention, making sure you consider consistency and equity in that process of what's been done in the past with previous students. And then thinking about other students in Jane's class outside of Bobby, are there other kids that, are on the verge of failing, and that one assignment is going to bring them down just because they either didn't do the project right or basically without plagiarism, a negative connotation. What if they just couldn't get an A on the assignment? So definitely want to think about all students and not just about the baseball player there. And then the justice paradigm, we all agree, again, there needs to be a consequence for Bobby. It's indicated in the handbook. One thought I had, what about Bobby's older brother? They don't say if the older brother's at the school still. Did his older brother know that the younger brother took the work and plagiarized it? If that older brother does know, do we need to do due process and a hearing for the older brother to determine if there's any consequences there? So, just thinking about, that whole process and that whole scope of fairness, justice, and equity. Amanda, if you go to the next slide. And so some quick points about what the principal should do. I mentioned earlier about what if it goes to trial. Obviously, the superintendent and Principal Tim had a conversation, but they may need to consult the legal team. We all spoke about the union rep with Molly and Jane. Thinking about those ramifications on, what would the union do to support Molly if this decision isn't upheld? So definitely some considerations about legal implications there. How can you address, the arbitrary and capricious behavior or decisions that have been happening so far? We know from our principal's guide that is a quote here, attorneys are sensitive to the demonstration of fairness in any policy. And so it was a little wise in the handbook for it to say may instead of will when we talk about that failing assignment. And so because it says may, that principal has a little bit of flexibility to kind of make a decision about that failing grade versus failing the course. And that broad interpretation there actually helps in this situation because it uses the word may instead of the word will. So again, we know legally principals give grades and not the teacher, which is another reason why the principal should take all authority to recognize that this is wrongdoing and to correct the problem. And obviously the last little section there about Principal Tim overriding the grading. Yes, we know that Jane has come after Bobby. The question is, what has she done in the past? What is she going to do in the future? That was brought up earlier. And so go ahead and nip it in the bud and have the conversations and make the decision. And the last scope, let's see here. Okay, the last scope I'm going to cover here is the care paradigm. There's a listing of them right there. Next slide, Amanda. So some points here, loyalty and trust. Definitely give Bobby credit for being honest. We know he had a breakdown and he admitted being wrong. That doesn't exempt him from consequences, but you have to acknowledge and recognize that. The dean, Rick, he came to Principal Tim and seems to be a great coworker, gave the full breakdown, the details, kind of has some foresight there. So make sure to obviously reinforce your admin team and be thankful that someone's got your back. Speaking with the teacher, Jane, the group before us and the discussion that was just had about trust, there's going to have to be some rebuild there when that principal overrides that decision. She may feel some disloyalty, but she was disloyal to school and district policy and kind of put the school and admin team in a bad position. So that's a transparent conversation. The concern and connection portion of the care paradigm, speak with Bobby about the consequences, maybe a written reflection, something that he can look back on, discuss real life, long-term implications. If he's a baseball star, what if this was a baseball scholarship he was on and he plagiarized? He loses that money, in college, could very well get kicked out of school and can't pay for school. I doubt that's the case, but you get the point. And then speak with Jane. Tell her that, hey, look, I know you have the union rep. I understand what you were trying to do, but you were wrong, and understand something. I want you to keep your house. We were legally in trouble here, and we kind of saved you from a tough position that you probably didn't even know you were in. And whether she sees it or not, that's definitely something you can still use to rebuild transparency and trust. And then the other point here about being nurturing and encouraged versus achievement. Get school counselors involved. Find out why Bobby felt the need to plagiarize. He said in the case study that, baseball's so busy and there's things going on. And so, trying to find anything he can do to get the assignment done. So figure out, that achievement piece with sports versus actually being an academically successful student. And then reinforce Jane's need to have that assignment and need to have good grading policies and good projects for her students. I think the project is a good idea. And maybe that needs to be said to the teacher, but you just need to tone down the weight of that assignment. So keep the project, find other ways to do it, just not so heavily weighted. And then the last slide here with the last 2 points on the care paradigm with relationships, meeting with Bobby's parents to let them know that project grading has been addressed. You don't have to say that you fired the teacher or put the teacher in line, but just say it's been addressed, and emphasize, Bobby's decision has been taken care of along with that process. What about the coach? I doubt it'll happen, but are there some athletic consequences that the coach can help with? I remember when I played basketball middle and high school, if my coach found out, I'd probably be benched for a game and run laps all night for doing something crazy like that. So maybe there's a coach implication that can take conversation that can be had with the principal and the team there. Again, talk with the teacher. Bobby's uncle, you might want to reach out as needed if there becomes a problem. have a real personal conversation about athletics and morals and making sure to have make good decisions moving forward. And even encourage the uncle, if you're such a big community figure, maybe you can be a role model to keep Bobby on the right track from making more poor decisions. And obviously, as a faculty, the principal definitely needs to review the student handbook for clarification as well as grade weights. I know at our school, at the beginning of the year in Power School, we have to have a meeting as departments to go through and set up those grade weights in the system. So I don't know what was the case in this case study, but that probably would be a huge help. And then the last section here about attention, support, discipline, and prodding. I would prod those teachers, figure out, is Jane the only one, or is there a committee of people having capricious and arbitrary assignments? Are grade weighting for assignments there? Again, support the interview project, but just, not with the same weight after you discipline the teacher for making the bad decision with the grading. And then finally, check on Bobby. Obviously, even though he's probably a knucklehead in class, you still have to do your job, as Dr. Lamb said, putting children first and making sure they're okay. So this could be the one thing that scares him straight and gets him on the straight path. So just reinforce those positive behaviors moving forward. And that leads me to Amanda's portion.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about critique. And so what should the principal do? So with corrupted morals, in this case, Bobby cheated, which was a corrupted moral. However, he did admit to the problem. He came forward to the teacher, admitted the problem. But what I really took away from this here was that Bobby's uncle, we can't allow his position in the community to corrupt our morals as the principal. He has to lead this whole process with, I'm following the law. This is what the law says, and not allow his morals to be corrupted by anybody else's decision. Sorry, I just now noticed that I've put Rick, but it's Tim. Cannot allow Jane to exert so much power over Bobby that cheating on one assignment will keep him from passing the class. And in the same regard, we can't let Bobby's family position hinder my decision as the principal either. I've got to follow the law. If I just follow the law every time, that's going to be what saves me as the principal. And then with critical theory, that's where we really look at privilege. And I think that is becoming more prevalent in today's society. Like, we hear a lot about that. And so we really want to let our staff know that privilege does not play a role in grading, where a student, based on whatever their socioeconomic status is, that's not going to impact it, that we are going to follow the law and do what's right for the child. And that's where the human rights comes in, because Jane can't also discriminate against Bobby for the fact of his family's position. And it doesn't really say that, but we don't know that she doesn't have something against that aspect, or the fact that he might be a baseball player and an athlete. So we have to consider human rights there. Then when we look at the ethics for profession, accountability for student and academic and social success, Tim is ultimately responsible for his school. He is the one who is responsible, and he has to understand that. So he needs to review the syllabus prior to the beginning of each semester with his teachers, and not just have them submit it and not go through it. Then model principles of self-awareness and reflective practice, transparency, and ethical behavior. He needs to empower his teachers. He should be having a conversation with Jane about why this is not acceptable, why one assignment cannot cause a child to fail. He should discuss with her that Bobby admitted to cheating, and so he has self-reflected and understands these consequences. And then to safeguard the values of democracy, equity, and diversity, he must ensure that all stakeholders have a voice. Every student must have equitable education. And he must also ensure that populations are represented equally. Consider and evaluate the potential moral and legal consequences. Again, looking at the powers and duties of a principal, it states that the principal assigns the grade. So he has to evaluate that legal consequence. That is his job. And then promote social justice and ensure the individual student needs informs all aspects of schooling. He must not let his decisions be guided by social pressures. He must rely on general statute and policy rather than affluence. And then the best interest of students, his priority is to ensure that students' rights are protected. Had he not intervened, Bobby would have had no rights. So Bobby showed responsibility in admitting his actions, and he must be the advocate for upholding that for the students while respecting the teacher.
Okay. Okay, I've got a couple of things and we're going to move quickly here. You can stop your share. In your ethical paradigm of care and justice, corrupted morals is not Bobby. That's the teacher. You've got to understand that's where that comes in. The teacher is the one who has displayed corrupted morals, not Bobby. Bobby's a kid. Cheating is just a disciplinary infraction. Going to the lengths that the teacher went to punish Bobby, that's where the corrupted morals comes in. But other than that, excellent job. And then, as was pointed out in this presentation, all outside assignments in aggregate are known as homework. And North and South Carolina, the limit on in aggregate, for the entire year, homework can only count 10%. That's state law in both states, by the way. 10% in aggregate. All homework for the entire year can only count 10%. That's definitive on that one. So make sure that was a good point. You brought that out in this one. And the other one, and I know Dr. Holloman wants to jump in on this one. Be careful of having your coaches punish players. You can get hit with double jeopardy. Everybody knows what double jeopardy is. That's punishing the kid twice for the same thing. Got to be careful of that, especially in high school. You're not allowed to do that. If the code of conduct says he gets 1 day of ISS, he gets 1 day of ISS. You can't give him 1 day of ISS and then punish him by not letting him play in the game or do whatever. Now, the only time you can take a kid out of a game is if he's suspended from school. He's not eligible to play. But other than that, if he's not suspended from school, can't do that. You got to be careful with that coaches taking, especially with high school kids. You run the risk of double jeopardy when you have coaches punish kids, in addition to the punishment that your assistant principal assigned to them. That's a no-no. Can't do that. Now, if you don't want to do that and you want to do that in lieu of, again, you got to be careful with that. Again, the kid's eligible to play if he's in school. The only time he's not eligible to play if he's suspended from school. And so you got to be careful on that one, because parents know their rights, especially parents of athletes know their rights. You kick that, now you've stirred up another hornet's nest bigger than the first one if you start taking him out of games. You got to be careful about that. All right. Our next group up is group number 3 is Kenny's group. Share your screen and let's roll.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we are Kenny, Amoy, Rebecca, Stephanie, and Marquise. I think Rebecca had to leave us, but we're gonna just move forward. So we started with background information as well, and of course, everybody has read the case study. So we don't really go far, but we did want to point out that the teacher was going to give Bobby a failing grade and that the handbook stated may, but it couldn't be like for like you can't have a zero tolerance policy. So it couldn't be for the entire class. That was one of the main things that we pointed out as we started this process. Because it's unethical and illegal. And then, of course, it's the principal's final decision. We're going to talk about that a little bit more during our presentation. But based on that general statute, when they had their meeting, like the principal, like the teacher could come to the meeting, she brought her union rep and all whatever. But at the end of the day, it's the principal's final decision because of that general statute. We also will elaborate a little bit more, but we thought that the principal needed to have a tough conversation with that teacher because it is unethical and illegal. So now we're going to get into a little bit more detail. Kenny?
Yes. So as far as due process, the two components there are substantive and procedural. So for substantive, of course, due process requires that the rules or policies be fair. So the way that we view the policy, the way it was written, especially, it didn't seem fair the way that it was written because of the grading policy and the teacher failed him for that one assignment, but then it ultimately would fail him for the entire course. So that in and of itself is not fair, ethical, or legal. And so we made note that she could have allowed him to redo the assignment, give him partial credit. There should have been a way to work around the cheating and work through that together for the student's benefit. Or then refer out to administration and look at other disciplinary action like ISS or something of that nature. But failing the entire course based on one assignment is just not fair in the due process. So as far as procedural goes, the due process requires that policies, rules, and regulations are carried out in a fair manner. So even though the policy stated that may give a failing grade, the teacher did not carry that out in a fair manner because ultimately she's manipulating grades to make sure or basically ensure that he fails. So this is obviously unethical and completely illegal, and it would change the course of this student's of course educational career, and then with the athletic aspect thrown in there as well. There are just so many layers of due process that are an issue in this case. Next slide.
Marquise?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, perfect. So for the principal's course of action, again, you've already stated that the policy wasn't being carried out fairly by the teacher. And although she bought her union rep and she went to the administrators, the final decision was up to the principal. And the principal made an ethical decision based off of restorative justice for the student. Although the student did have plagiarism and the student admitted to it, the teacher was not allowed to fail them for the whole class. She needed to provide a way for them to be able to make up for it, or either make up for it or make a better grade, even if it wasn't an A. For example, at my school, students are able to do the assignment again, but up to a certain grade. So if you cheat on a test, you can take a different test, but you can only get up to an 80. And so that way they still have a chance to make a decent grade, but you don't get full credit. And that would be ethical compared to what this teacher was doing as far as just trying to fail him for the whole class.
Amoy?
Good night, everyone.
Hey.
So, in terms of the ethical paradigm, the teacher did not make a decision that was fair to Bobby. Her actions were excessive, unethical, and illegal. There was no indication that his actions could lead to the results that it led to. And of course, there was no justice at all for Bobby. There were a lot of things that the teacher could have and should have done differently. I'm sorry, Kennedy's judging me for class tonight. So that's that part there. For care, there are actions that could have should have been taken to restore some relationships, discussions with Bobby, to let him know that although this particular action was unfair to him, going forward, assure him that more care will be taken to ensure that it doesn't happen again. There definitely needs to be a conversation with the teacher, regardless of what action is going to be taken, how that relationship is going to end immediately or further down the line. There must be some conversation to be had with the teacher, even if she's going to be dismissed immediately, to ensure there's a possibility that it doesn't happen again to another child wherever she might be employed afterwards. It should be established that what she did was unethical and entirely illegal, so that at least she can reflect on her actions going forward. There should be attention and support given to the student, and not only Bobby, but other students, to check to see, did the same thing happen to other students in his current class or in the past, to check on the teacher's history of grading. If had the teacher been adhering to the grading policies. And in terms of discipline, there should be some disciplinary action for Bobby, but of course, one disciplinary action, and it should not be excessive. Let the punishment fit the crime, essentially. Thank you.
Okay, so then we talked about different ethical paradigms as critique and profession. So we discussed, can one grade cause a student to fail a course? And of course, we've already stated it's illegal and unethical. It cannot. And did the consequence fit the action? The consequence the teacher tried to put in to allow Bobby to fail the course based on one plagiarized assignment did not fit the action. And then, was that in the best interest of Bobby? And the answer is no. So even though we felt like Bobby should be held accountable and he should be given either a chance to redo an assignment or in school suspension or something, so that he's not being double charged or getting the double jeopardy like you previously stated, he should also be accountable for his actions. But we also discussed how we felt like the teacher should be accountable for her actions. She knew that that was illegal and unethical, and even though there was some wording in the handbook that might have been like, she might have been able to like see gray with it, like at the end of the day, you know that that's not right and that's not in the best interest of your student, which is the whole reason you have a job. So I think that the principal needed to have that tough conversation with her as well about like why we have this grading policy, why we put these things in place, and what we can do to help Bobby get restorative justice so that he's also learning from his mistakes instead of just being like taking a year or spending his summer at school so he's not playing in the baseball thing. And it goes back to the uncle that's on the school board and on the Chamber of Commerce, because that's money and that's somebody that as a superintendent and principal, like you want to have your back. But at the same time, like, it's not all about money. It's not all about that person having your back. It's about this teacher who made this mistake, this huge mistake, and how we hold the teacher accountable also. And then Just is it ethical? And we've stated multiple times that it was not ethical. And then I think that's what we had.
Okay. Let's assume for a moment, you stop your share. Let's assume for a moment that we're not, going back to Rock Hill, Northwestern and Rock Hill, that we give the kid a 0 on this assignment. I mean, in aggregate, all homework can only count 10% in aggregate. And so it's not really going to affect the yearly grade, unless this is the only homework assignment they've had all year. And even then, it's only going to be 10%. It's most it can be. And so my point is, I like the conclusion of this last one. This is really about the teacher doing something illegal. That's not even close. It's not gray. You can say, well, she didn't know, she couldn't. No, give him a 0 on homework. If you're going, if you're going to give him a 0, but still, it can only be 10%. It can't be more than 50%. That's an illegal action. That was not incidental or accidental.
She just didn't put it in for like a 0 as like one assignment or like homework or whatever. She manipulated it. So
that's exactly that shows intent. See, when you go to court, that's the standard when you go to court. And I've been too many times when I was the deputy. We got these cases. That's the first thing that shows intent. That the law is 10% in aggregate, and for you to manipulate this to more than 50% shows intent. This wasn't accidental or incidental. That's why I said this person intended to break the law and intended to harm this child. And one of the things we have to be careful of, if Dr. Holloman shoots me later tonight and he says, well, it's the first time I've ever done that, doesn't mean that I'm not dead. And it doesn't, that notion, well, maybe this is her first time. And no, she showed intent. She knew she was breaking the law and did it intentionally. But, the outcome was so heinous that we can't just excuse this. This is more than just accidental or incidental is my point. And you got to draw your line. What is too much for you as a school administrator? What is too much? All right. Excellent presentation. Sequoia.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Dr. Griffin Jordan, and this may be a silly question. I apologize if it is, but you talked about putting your teachers on a growth plan. Now, I think at my school, it's called an action plan. Would that be like the same idea?
There are two, in DPS, there are 2 levels. There is an action plan. And that is pretty much the first step. Once you get to the monitored growth plan, that's where you're documenting in their evaluation. Pretty much that's the step before HR works with you to non-renew or to end their contract. So that monitored growth plan is the highest level of them being penalized for whatever it is that they've done.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
That's a great question. The first step is always an action plan, just like last semester when I showed y'all MTSS for Teachers, my action plan, my professional growth plan. It has an action plan, but the purpose of an action plan is to try to get you to improve. A monitored growth plan means we're past, you didn't do it. We're past that now. We're in the documentation phase. If you don't improve now, we're going to let you go. I mean,
and usually that's within 3 to 6 months. When you document in your growth plan, if you don't improve or follow these specific steps within 3 to 6 months, that's grounds for you to be terminated.
That's correct. Action plan is improvement. A monitored growth plan is you didn't improve. We gave you the chance, you did not improve, or what you did was so heinous, we skipped the improvement piece and went right to the documentation piece, where if you don't do better now, you're out. And so But in general, action plans are working with you to try to get you to improve. If you'll remember mine, we've been doing one-on-one coaching. We're trying to get you better. We want to keep you. But you got to do better than you're doing. This is, we're past that oh honey baby please stage where we're trying to get you to do better. Now we're at the serious part of, if you don't do better, we're going to terminate you. So that's a great question. That's a legal designation. That's a great question. That's a good catch. All right, we're ready for Sequoia's group. Go right ahead.
Good evening, everyone. So myself, Jessica, and Katie will be presenting our case study. So we have also included the background information as to Bobby plagiarizing his brother's assignment, trying to turn it in, and then finally admitting once the teacher did her investigation, finding out that he did plagiarize. Looking at the handbook and reading the wording that the teacher, Jan, followed, and kind of pointing out, we want to kind of point out that cheating of any kind may require a failing grade by the teacher, and seeing that Jan kind of wanted to use that as an advantage to herself in choosing the consequence for his plagiarism. Also with the uncle kind of using his status or knowing the uncle and his status, how that also may play a part into the decision that would be made with Bobby and his playing sports as well. So looking at the due process, we pull from our book in chapter 6, before administering corporal punishment, school officials should develop, publish, and disseminate rules that provide students and their parents with adequate notice that specific violations may result in corporal punishment. So looking at the two types of due process, substantive due process requires that the rules or policies be fair and of themselves. And then procedural requires that the policies, rules, and regulations be carried out in a fair manner. So making sure that in following this, this rule that was broken by Bobby, are the consequences going to need to be fair, and are they going to be carried out in a following in the manner as the rules and policies and regulations. So proper notice of the charges in written or oral form against the student should be given to Bobby. An explanation of the evidence that support the charges, and then Bobby should have an opportunity to present his side about his actions in plagiarizing the assignment. A fair and impartial hearing should be granted to present the problem with a school administration team, parent, student, and teacher.
Okay, and then we have, what should the principal course of action be? First, we discussed that Bobby should meet with the principal to discuss his side about his knowledge of the school policy, the signature of this receipt of the handbook that states this policy, and discuss maybe what his punishment should be. How does he feel that he should be judged with this offense? And then we said that the principal should meet with the teacher, Jane Barton, to discuss the ethical standards in the school policy on dealing with plagiarism, the disappropriate weight of the assignment. The group agreed that the assignment was weighed very heavily. We wanted to also say that there should be a meeting with the teacher to discuss how can we assist this student and not result in the same action again. So looking at the grading policy and understanding how can we include levels of offense, because levels of offense was not stated in the policy. And this will be considered in my district a level 1 or 0 offense. So it will be something that would be miscued and be like, hey, I need you to redo this assignment. And you're gonna get maybe 10% taken off or 20% taken off. But to get a failing grade, that is not something that will be a level 5, 6 offense. It will be a level 0, something that will be dealt in-house. And then we said that Bobby mother should have a discussion with the principal so she can also understand the seriousness of the assignment and the actions that will be taken. You can go ahead, Katie.
Okay, I was making sure I had my mute on. All right, how do the 4 ethical paradigms relate to the case? So we just laid out each one of the paradigms and put some descriptions for each one of those, including fairness and equity and justice, Jim Crow, corporal punishment. And then we put our thoughts in here as we were discussing these different paradigms. So our thoughts were Bobby Felon for the year for plagiarizing didn't show justice. There was a lack of equity based on the principal's actions to rethink the disciplinary decision-making process. They based it all on one merit, and that showed the arbitrary power. The teacher's actions, heavily weighted on that one assignment as a pass or fail, just resulted in Bobby failing for the entire year, and that made it capricious. An opportunity should be available for the student to redo the assignment with some kind of penalty in place for the same assignment. Then we take a look at care, things like loyalty and trust, relationships, attention and support. And our thoughts were that the principal held that meeting with Bobby to hear his side of the story according to the procedures and get a better understanding of what actually occurred from his side of the story. The principal should show concern about wanting to provide more adequate punishment for the plagiarism that Bobby committed in his own way, and meet with the teacher to provide more in-depth description and kind of support and discuss the policy within the school's handbook. Allow the teacher to have some ownership and decision-making in that adjustment, a voice, but ultimately the grading policy comes down to the principal. And the critique, talking about power and social class. So we've discussed this in a couple of different ways. Bobby showed that his intent was to plagiarize the assignment, not necessarily of corrupt morals perhaps, but maybe he was just overwhelmed. And in terms of power, Principal Davison had to be reminded of who Bobby's uncle was, showing that emphasis on social class and political sway, as it may be, in that decision process. Because it was mentioned in the student's absence from athletics and how that could affect the school as a whole with scholarship funds. And then in profession, talking about the accountability for student academic social success, considering evaluation, the moral and legal consequences. Our thoughts were that Bobby's accountable for his actions and forthcoming. He did admit that he cheated. And the principal and the teacher have an ethical duty and responsibility to support and have the best interest of the students always. The incident is transparent in that we know the actions that happened. However, the principal and the teacher have to reflect on their practices individually and together and clarify the contents of their student code of conduct or handbook.
Excellent. Excellent job. All right. Regina, Laquana, Swan, Wendy. See if we got anything new on this one.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Okay, so we are team number 1, and we're here to discuss the case study with cheating strike out Bobby. And so we're going to start with our first slide, just kind of giving an overview of the case study directions in which most of our other team or classmates have already.
You can skip through those
Okay.
things and go to your next slide. All right.
Okay, so the first is the due process. And so we're going to have our first team person talk about the timeline of the classroom instruction for the assignment.
So as a group, we just discussed the timeline of the classroom instructions for the assignments, such as did the teacher give a syllabus with the grading scale attached to it? Also, did she explain plagiarizing and or the consequences of it before giving the assignment, and how that may have affected the student's understanding, or the student understanding what plagiarism is and how much it would actually, the grading scale would affect his actual grades, which we all know now that is that it was unethical, and that the assignment was, the percentage was way too much. And obviously he shouldn't be able to fail the class for the entire year based off of that. So we basically just discussed what were the instructions, was it clear about the grading scale, and did the students understand what plagiarism was, and did she explain it, and did she go into detail about any of that?
Okay. Who's next? We've paused.
Okay, I'm gonna just go ahead and go for the both parties statement. It is very important when you're a leader or administrator, even though the teacher may come and give her statement, it is very important that the principal hear all sides, and that means all sides from the student and the teacher. So I think before any calls need to be made or anything, the principal need to gather all of the information.
All right, next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go. We got it.
I was on mute. I was talking about the fairness of grading. And in due process, it's required that grading policies be fair and reasonable. In this case, it was not, because the teacher, of course, we talked about the grading scale being too much. A different point I thought about was the district leaders and school leaders do a lot of things to make sure parents are well informed of their students' progress. And in doing that, they want to make sure, like if a kid is failing, you're communicating with a parent. In a situation like that, it's very hard to, a kid fails at the very end of the class, to go back and kind of forewarn a parent about something like this. So we thought that was kind of outrageous. And then also, just that outside assignment, and I know you talked about it being homework, but does it really give a good representation of the students' mastery of the course objection? Course objective. So
yeah, and that's why, and yeah, that's a great point, Regina. That's why state law says homework can only count 10%, because it is not a reflection of mastery. That's why it's limited in its use. It can only count up to 10%. Some districts don't even count it anything anymore, because to your point, it does not reflect mastery or what a kid knows. I mean, of all in terms of the value of grades, and they're supposed to have some value. Homework is the least valuable, and that's the whole point of this case is that the substantive due process was there. It's the procedural, how it was done. But something as simple as a throwaway, that's why I keep referring to it as a throwaway homework project, to count more than half of the yearly grade, is I can't say it would never happen, but it's so ridiculous as to be, is hopefully not a thing, but you know, it is in this case. But the point to know here is as Regina just made, I mean, how do you portray yourself as caring about kids and working to stop dropouts and academic difficulty, and then at the end of the year you pull a stunt like this? You're talking about losing public trust. This could be a killer. But that's a great point, Regina. I like that one.
Okay, and then I'm going to talk real quick about the student conduct handbook parent notification. So before the administrator contacts the parent, is just very important to use this as a teaching moment where he can talk to the student about his conduct and also refer to the handbook. He can also talk with the parents when he notified them, or if he has them have them come in. This is something that he can refer to, but then he also have to be careful when he's notifying, he's only notifying the parents, even though this person is the board member is a family, but he has to also pay attention to confidentiality and not disclosing too much information to too many people, even persons that's within the school. And the other was justice. I stated this before in reference to getting counsel, maybe from the general counsel from the district level, in reference to the teacher's unethical, the way how she conducted herself in regards to the grades, and also making sure that even with the teacher creating her grading scale, that is something that was also discussed, even with the teacher, like even as the administrator, making sure when teachers are creating their syllabus and rubric that they are following those rubric, making sure that that ball was not dropped, that all of that information is outlined. Especially, we don't know if Bobby parents are connected to the school, is his mom or his dad as a teacher. They can definitely go there in reference to was the teacher's grading policy, if that even comes up, if that's disclosed to someone that the teacher was actually going to come after Bobby about his grading.
Okay, in reference to care, we talked about suggestions from all parties in the sense of, okay, we hear, like for the teacher, we hear what you're saying. Ultimately, we're not keeping the grade the same. I would like teacher buy-in, but if that doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Also being able to talk to Bobby's parents or guardians. I know it's just the uncle, but talk to all people that are involved with Bobby and kind of hear their perspective of what we could do in terms of making it right, like coming up with some type of plan of action that will not result in harm. I think we lose the trust and loyalty from the student. We lose that student's trust if we cause harm in the way that everything was set up. It could, if we uphold the failing grade.
And for the third paradigm of critique, we discussed also the corrupt morals. We originally were thinking it was probably the principal and superintendent, because the way that they discussed the board member being a family member and all of the social class that plays into that, privilege, political power, how you discuss funds for the school. So many things about that came into issue, but the bottom line was that the grade was unethical, the teacher was wrong. So I'm going to say now the teacher is definitely exhibiting the corrupted morals. But I don't think it should have been a discussion with the principal and superintendent about the social class part of the student.
I agree. I think that's what this is all about. That's not supposed to matter.
Right.
And entering into that discussion means that it probably does matter. It's not supposed to.
Exactly.
And I agree 1,000%. That one, I can go for that. Yeah, the teacher did a wrong and illegal and immoral thing, but the principal and now we know those conversations happen, but they shouldn't.
Right. The students should still be treated fairly regardless.
Exactly. Doesn't matter how you treat the least of me. It's how you treat me. I believe a fellow a lot greater than me said that. And so that's what we're talking about here. I mean, the notion of public schooling is we had private schools in this country before we had a country. You know, Harvard dates back to the 1600s. Public schools are allowed for in the preamble to the Constitution that states may provide public education. They're for the masses. What I generally refer to, and probably pejoratively, is the great unwashed. You know, that's what school is for. It's so that everybody gets that's the building block of the American dream, that folks get a chance to rise above their circumstance. And when we start factoring into privilege and other things into that, it kind of goes against the grain of what public education is all about to begin with. It's in order to give every child a chance and give them an opportunity. It's greater than ourselves, folks. It's bigger than that. And I too am uncomfortable with that conversation where we're factoring in who is this kid and what decision we make is going to be based on the blowback on who the kid is. That's not what we do. That's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be better than that. That's a great point.
Okay, and to wrap it up, we did under the paradigm of profession, we talked about accountability and academic success, and basically stating that what is the accountability on the part of Bobby? We all know he cheated. Okay, so we have to be accountable. And how can we help Bobby to be successful? What can we do to improve his academic success? Because obviously there was an issue behind him not being able to complete the assignment. So we have to get to the bottom of that. And then how can we help him to be successful? And also the accountability of the teacher. It's obvious that she broke the law. So now how do we hold her accountable for what she did, and how can we address the situation? And as stated in previous groups, there are several things that we can do to address that issue.
Yeah.
And so that wraps it up.
It's great. Power, privilege, race should never be a factor in things like this. We should not enforce. That goes back to, remember that one I've got in there that says Jim Crow? That's what we're talking about here, folks. You thought that one didn't matter, that one wasn't going to rear its ugly head, but that's exactly, as Wendy pointed out, that's exactly what that Jim Crow means. That covert classism against the poor and downtrodden, no matter what color they are. That's what we're talking about. Jim Crow wasn't just minority folks, it was poor people as well. That's what we're talking about here. We're supposed to be classless in terms of how we see. We're not supposed to see people in what class that they're in economically. That should not factor in. But who Bobby's uncle is or isn't is not a part and parcel of this, or should not be. All right, we're down to our last group. Matt's ready to roll.
Yes, we are. Let's hope that everybody is still up and running. I know it's getting late, so we're not going to take up a whole lot of time with rundowns because we've already covered our original rundown of case study part 1. Everybody's got the summary, so we've covered that portion. One of the things that we talked about in our group was talking with our school legal attorney and legal representation. We wanted to make sure that we talk with both parties separately. The teacher's in the wrongdoing. We need to address that with her. We also need to address the incident with the student and the family to make sure that everything is good. We also discussed coming up with the alternative assignment as well. And one of the big things is to rewrite that zero tolerance policy. It cannot say may anymore because it's going to leave you in a sticky situation. It has to be altered and addressed as far as that goes. We talked about substantive and the procedural due process area. One of the things that we found very interesting is across the country, you cannot say, fail a student for a singular cheating offense, no matter where it is across the entire United States. Most offer a 50% a first-time offense and can remake the assignment as part of restorative justice. Parents and school administration must be notified within a 24-hour period when that initially happens. And it doesn't seem that Teacher Jane did that for her principal or for the parents at home. So this is another area where there could be a violation have taken place. The zero tolerance area is what has to be taken out because that is what has harmed the student. And unfortunately, while we don't have all the information about Bobby's ethnic background, that could have been a major factor, as we'll discuss here in the later portion. In terms of arbitrary and capricious, like we talked about, the cheating may require, again, there's that word, that's what has to be removed and has to be taken out. They can't have the punishment outweigh the long-term negative effects. The student still has to have an opportunity to learn, and that's not being provided if you're failing them based on a singular assignment. So as we talked about with the definitions of justice, care, critique, and profession, most of those were able to be addressed as we went through. Bobby's rights are violated with that zero tolerance policy that has to be amended. As far as the care, even though you're risking a relationship with the teacher, that's not the point. You are there for the students. And well, the heck with her at that point is that she's done something in violation. There may be even previous incidents that Tim may not be aware of. And we just caught this one with Bobby. So that is going to be something that needs to be checked out just to make sure that her policies have not been negatively impacting other students along the way. In terms of the critique section, like we said, we don't have enough information from the case study about Bobby's ethnicity or social class. We do know that the uncle is part of the Board of Education, but the problem is that there's that community sway that should not have been part of the discussion whatsoever. And we need to also know whether or not Teacher Jane's issues had anything to do with what Bobby was putting together. And therefore, as the professional area, despite that school policy violation, you can't fail him for the entire semester. He's got to have that alternative pathway. He's got to have the restorative justice, and we need to make sure that he has the opportunity to become educated as he continues to go through.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. I'm going to, first of all, we're right on our time. Next time in 2 weeks, we're going to split, so it won't take 2 hours, but I want everybody to be with us tonight. So we won't grind you through 2 hours the rest of the way. We met last night. We're going to do this all together this first night, but we'll split next time. We'll talk about that next week. So don't worry that you're going to have to do 9 o'clock on and on. This is just a one-time deal. To Matthew's point, I pulled up a couple of articles. I think you should read about zero tolerance, that it's disproportionate against poor and people of color. You should read those because that's part of this. And so in the end, this case was about the difference between substantive and procedural due process, because that's what we've been covering the last couple of weeks. And the substance is there. It was the procedure where it got sideways. And so even though this was a disciplinary case over a disciplinary incident, it wasn't a disciplinary incident for Bobby. It was the teacher that was the disciplinary problem in this one. She clearly broke the law with intent. Even if she gave the zero, which she shouldn't do, it still wouldn't have resulted in anywhere near a failing grade because, you know, all the assignments. I mean, that would be like me counting one of your peer reviews as more than half the grade in this class. Something that's just a simple, you know, that shouldn't count 1%, you know, counting more than 50%. That's not accidental or incidental. That's a clear violation of the law. So this is a disciplinary case about the teacher. But now, if you'll remember back to last semester in the beginning of this course, we told you, you've got to learn to change your lens. That's why this case comes first. And that's the whole point of this case is teachers do bad things. That doesn't mean that we don't love teachers. Doesn't mean that we don't support teachers, but teachers can do bad things. And you have to change your lens from that of, we always support teachers and we make sure that we're facilitating them and to the point where we understand our job as children. You don't teach a soul. You work with teachers and you have to make sure that you understand that your job is to do the best for a child every day. And you need to start pretty often, about once a semester. You need to make sure you start a faculty meeting with the notion that, you know, I'm going to go ahead and apologize right now. If a decision comes down between you as a faculty and students, I got to pick students, and remind people of that quite often. And people will give you grace if they understand that that's what you're doing. On the other hand, if if you're just there to support teachers, things will not go well for you, nor your community, nor for your students. You've got to have the proper perspective. I'm going to let my two colleagues give a final thought. I want Dr. Holloman to specifically address coaches punishing students with game time or participation time, about the drawbacks of that, and then we'll finish up with Dr. Griffin Jordan. So Dr. Holloman, if you would speak to that as we go out tonight.
When you mentioned it earlier, I was actually thinking about how that can turn sideways very quickly for you. If you were to tell a teacher, don't worry about taking care of the disciplinary action in the classroom, or if you as an assistant principal or principal decide you're not going to handle it using board policy, but use your own method of punishment. If you do that, just know that the consequences could be probably more heavy on you than they would have been had you suspended the child from the very beginning. It's going to always look as though you are trying to punish them in the area that hurts them the most versus being fair. And so if you take Bobby out of a ball game on a Friday night his senior year, and he was a starting pitcher when the college scout was coming, all of a sudden now you're the one doing something unethical, and it's capricious and there's no way around it. So better to just be fair, be equitable, regardless of what happens. Follow the rule book, follow policy, and don't decide to do something because you think that it's going to teach him a lesson. That teaching a lesson part, you can do it different ways, but that's not the way to do it, because typically it turns back around on you very quickly.
That's exactly right. Well said.
I wrote down a couple of good points that I heard throughout the evening.
I heard a lot.
Yeah. And I just kind of want to highlight them because they're really good points. What has the administration done to help the situation even beforehand? There are some things like it was mentioned with the staff handbook or the student handbook. Were the parents and students aware? Did they sign? Was there some type of orientation so that the parents and students knew policies? Teachers, is there some type of staff development, especially for onboarding with your new teachers, so that they know this is good, this is not good? General things that coming in, you think, okay, everybody knows that. No, it needs to be done. It needs to be laid out for all stakeholders. And then one of the groups indicated that if the parent of the student asked you, well, what's being done to the teacher? What's being done to the teacher? What reprimand is the teacher getting? Your reply is, it has been addressed. I've had to say that so many times when parents ask what we do with teachers, with parents ask, what did you do with the other student that hit my child? You cannot ever, ever, ever speak on someone else's behalf or on another case with the parent or someone that's not involved. So your concern has been addressed is something that I've said so many times, but that's as far as you let them know that you have addressed their concerns.
Excellent. Y'all did a great job tonight. I heard a lot of good things. We're continuing to work on that lens. As I said, in 2 weeks, when we do our second case study, we're going to split you into 2 groups of 3 each so that it won't take all night. But y'all, I wanted to hear everybody's tonight. You did a great job, and I'm very pleased. Your work is good. Our coaches are going to work with a couple of you that are a little behind, but I think we're doing well as a group. It's a large group, 25 in one group, but we're keeping up and we're doing well. I'm very pleased. The scores are coming back from TaskStream. They're great. I couldn't be more pleased with that. Everything seems to be, I'm the proverbial husband. I'm the last to know, but I think things are going really well. And thanks again to our 2 resident principals. They had to put up with me last night as we planned for tonight. They're spending a lot of time that you don't know about, but they're doing a great job for you as well. And I appreciate them. They keep me straight. I will see you next week. Everybody have a good week. And again, thank you.
Great job, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.